Good Monday to you. It is Monday, the 12th of September. I cannot believe it's the 12th of September. Holy smokes. Well, look, I know that the calendar technically says there's a few days left of summer, but let's just face reality. Summer's over. Sorry to say that. We are less than 60 days from the midterms. Congress is back in session tomorrow. School's back in session. Primary season, as I'll get to in a minute, is about to wrap up. So sorry, summer's open. I know the pools might be open here and there around the country, but my summer mood is over. I'm back. I'm into fall. I'm into fall. Sorry, and and technically, my birthday, for those of you who are looking to get a gift or send well wishes, or is the 23rd, which usually is the first day of fall. I've got to check again. So I'm well aware of when fall technically starts, but anyway, enough of my ranting because I'm just a little bummed. I always hate this sort of transition from summer to fall. It's sort of, I don't know. It's probably the worst transition of the four season changeovers that I don't like. I don't mind, fall into winter. You kind of get. It's also um, it's the holiday season, so I'm kind of excited. And then of course you're always excited when spring comes, so that's great. And then spring becomes summer, so again it's always exciting, kind of going through the seasons. But then I feel like there's something kind of just like blah about, you go from summer, you've been having a great time relaxing outside, the kids in my case are out going to camps, and less running around on the weekends going to sporting events, and back and forth to different travel teams, this and that, and fields. But so anyway, that enough off my soapbox. We got five things to get to today, as always. We're going to touch on Queen Elizabeth. Obviously, 9/11 just happened, the commemoration of it yesterday. I want to touch on that. Trump's in D.C. today, Monday, August 12th. We're going to get to that in a second, because it's not just that he's here. It's I don't know. Interesting. Gonna touch on the final primaries. I mentioned summer's over. Tomorrow are the last three primaries. We'll get to that. And then finally, this is something you generally don't hear me talk about, so you got to wait till the end. Tonight are the Emmys, and I got a word about that. So let's kick it all off. I want to start with the Queen. Um, Generally speaking, I don't think that I'm someone that's enamored with the royals, or the pomp and circumstance across the pond. But it's been sort of, I've been fascinated to dip into this, more because of, like, I love their little palace intrigue, right? So you've got Charles taking over, and it's funny because I've learned a lot about what the roles are in the role of the Queen, and I think you're going to see a very marked difference. It's funny how some of this analysis really gets into what she did over the last 70 years to modernize the monarchy, to keep it relevant, who she was as a person, how she became so beloved, not just among her own people, but throughout the world. And it's interesting, how I think we're going to see a real marked shift with Charles. And I was hearing some stories over the weekend about how she's very thrifty and she loved to joke around and she's very personable. I've never met either one of them, either the Queen or Charles, or frankly, I don't think I've ever met a single member of the royal family. But Charles just doesn't come across as the warm, fuzzy, fun guy that I think she kind of had some playfulness to her. She was somewhat of a jokester. We played a clip on Spicer and Company the other night of her surprising some Americans at one point that were out getting pictures around the castle. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see how this transition goes, because you got to get through. You got to get, you got to go through Charles to get to William and Kate, and I think people, they're going to do a fabulous job. I think if you're a lover of the royal family, or sort of, I think William and Kate will kind of use it in the same spirit that the Queen had it. I think there's going to be a very interesting bridge with Charles in the middle. It's also been fascinating to watch this sort of dynamic between William and Kate. Who, by the way, I will tell you, if William had to take over right now, I think he could. I mean, he is rip roaring ready to go. Kate Middleton has been just spectacular by his side. I can't believe I'm having this conversation. But I've been watching this sort of interaction with Harry and Meghan. Man, you could cut that tension. It definitely does not look great, but I guess it's nice that they're all there together to honor their mother. Uh, anyway, getting back to the actual funeral, though, they they set forth these days. I guess called London Bridge, and there's going to be a bunch of ceremonies and such. It's funny that the only people that are going to go from the U.S. are President Biden and the First Lady. why does that matter? Because normally, like when there's a delegation that gets sent from a country, either to an inauguration or to a funeral. Like that's pretty much the job of a vice president. um, but they are limiting this to one person and their significant other spouse per country. So no former presidents are going. I don't think obviously the ambassador can't go, which is kind of interesting. There was a story that I read this morning where they're asking them to like take buses and it's gonna. I can't imagine Biden getting on the 9 train or whatever it is. It's just been like, oh, can you tell me how to get to Buckingham Palace, please? Secret Service would never allow that. But it's funny because there's like a story I read this morning that said Trump not invited, and it's not that Trump was not invited. It's like people in the media sometimes literally go out of their way to make up stories. It's that they invited one person, and that's going to be the sitting head of government in every country. So it's leave it to the media to make this a problem for everybody. The last so by the way, then Queen Elizabeth will finally have her funeral on September 19th at Westminster Abbey, and she'll lie in state at Westminster Hall from Wednesday to Saturday at Buckingham Palace. So it's been interesting to watch this happen, and it's funny to me in a weird way with everything that's going on in the world. It is nice to see something that draws everybody together, and I'm glad to have this happen. Although I will say, once in a while, to see one of these wackadoodles on the left start talking about how colonization and it's like, give me a break. I mean, she is, they clearly are not the kingdom that they once were, and things are not exactly colonized since they were 100 years or plus ago. So, but you leave it to the Hollywood and leftist types to somehow try to make an issue out of everything. Second story, as I mentioned at the top, 9/11. Yesterday was a very interesting day. I was on Capitol Hill on 9/11 and watched the smoke kind of coming up from the Pentagon. Remember driving home. I lived in Old Town Alexandria. So I had to drive not to the Pentagon, but if you've ever been to Washington, D.C. and gone into Virginia, you go over the 14th Street Bridge to get out of D.C., at least from where I was on Capitol Hill. And you're heading straight towards Crystal City, and the Pentagon is right on your right. Right before you get to the Pentagon, there's a turn that says George Washington Memorial Parkway, and that's how you go to Reagan National Airport, at least one of the prominent way. And I that's the exit at the time, 20-something years ago, that I took. I lived in North Old Town, Alexandria. So I would have to come up to the edge of the Pentagon, if you will, and then take this little off-ramp and shoot down the parkway. I say that because that's how close I got. I mean, it was insane, the smoke that was going on and the chaos that ensued. So for me, every time this anniversary comes around, it does hit home. This is the first year, though, and I talked about this on the show, that we weren't at war. We didn't have a presence in Afghanistan or Iraq. And it's a weird feeling. Again, I'm not saying that, to realize what's happened over the last 20 years and how many people have sacrificed to keep the country safe and how many things have changed because of that one fateful day. I mean, you go to an airport now, things are completely different. And while that's true, I do wonder sometimes whether or not we have taken our eye off the prize and forgotten. I mean, if you look at what happened in Afghanistan and with this withdrawal and how many people we just let into the country and the resurgence of the Taliban and Al Qaeda, it's like all this and where are we now? And like I said, I feel like to some degree we have forgotten what we fought for and why we fought, and because we took our eye off the prize. I posted some of the pictures on Instagram, but on Saturday night I have done this, and I haven't done it every year, but I've done it several years, where we do this Arlington Memorial 5K that benefits the police, fire, and EMS that responded to the Pentagon on 9/11. And it is an amazing, it basically just loops the Pentagon, goes out, starts down on Army Navy Drive, if you're familiar with with the Pentagon area with Crystal City there, and then kind of makes a big loop. You go down. There's a little part on 395 and then 110. And the thing that's so unique is that you've got firemen in full gear running. You've got EMS and different other authorities, law enforcement, et cetera, that are running with you. And it's just, these guys get it, man. They have had to stay vigilant, and so much of their lives have changed, and so many colleagues have been affected. Anyway, I did it. I actually ran with my son for the first time, or he ran for the first time. He had been pushed in a stroller when he was a kid. I was reminding that. I said, he said, I think this is my first time. He said, well, it's your first time running. You've been pushed several times. But it was a great experience, not just for me, but to be able to explain to him why we're doing this and the importance of it. And then as we were running, we saw the firemen. You could say this is why this is so important to these folks. This is what they did. They saved so many lives, and so many of their colleagues were affected by this. Anyway, as I mentioned, obviously, if you're listening to this today on Monday, Trump made I think I hate to say the word surprise, because I'm sure it's not a surprise to him and the people who've seen. But he showed up in D.C. today. This is on the heels of, you got 35 people, his allies, aides, etc., were raided by the FBI on Friday. We're going to talk about this in Spicer and Company tonight. If you're watching the show, I don't get it. I mean, 35 people out of nowhere get raided by the FBI, and I'm like, okay, for what? And how did this not get more attention? By the way, it's really interesting. A lot of speculation online, and who knows, in the next 24 or 48 hours, maybe we'll know why he's in D.C. But apparently, there's photos that he's wearing golf shoes and a shirt. And so who knows? Maybe he's heading off to his golf club in Virginia, which wouldn't be a surprise either. He's got that one out here in Northern Virginia. So, but it'll be interesting. Obviously, America First policies is in D.C. as well, that think tank. So there's a lot of reasons, but it's just normally there's usually in town for an event or something. So I don't know. Keep that on your radar. See what happens. But it also will be interesting to see. On Friday, he had two of his top aides, Brian Jack, the former political director of the White House, who's still advising him to some degree, and Stephen Miller were also subpoenaed. So again, there's a lot of stuff going on. I would say somewhat below the radar, and something worth keeping an eye on as all of this legal stuff continues to bubble up. Mentioned the primaries. Believe it or not, this is it. This is it. 3 more, and then we're done. We have the map is set. The field is set, if you will, for the general election. Delaware, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island are the last 3 states. In a weird way, it's like, wow, I can't believe we're done. And on the other hand, the thing that's interesting to me, and I grew up, obviously, for those of you who've paying attention to Rhode Island, so New England has always tended to have later primaries, first couple weeks of September. So this is nothing new to me, except as you get older in terms of politics, you realize that the later these primaries are, they really help the incumbent, right? So we're now less than 60 days. So if you're in one of these primaries and you win, you've spent a lot of your time and a lot of your money, if not all of it, trying to win a primary. And suddenly you're now focused on trying to win, a general election. And you have to raise a lot more money. And that just doesn't give you as much time to pivot. And frankly, early voting obviously hasn't started because you don't know, but it's jumps right in. So you've got to get those ads up, you got to get the money in your pocket, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just go over this quick. Delaware, there's really nothing big in Delaware. I think there's probably some state or county or something like that, or council, town primaries, but there's really nothing on the radar there. In New Hampshire, there's 2 congressional districts. Both have primaries. The real interesting one is the 1st district, where Democrat Chris Pappas is the incumbent, and you have several Republicans seeking to take her on. And if you watch Spicer and Company tonight at 5, we're going to have at least 2 of them, Matt Mowers and Caroline Levitt. Gail Huff Brown, former Senator Ambassador Scott Brown's wife, is also running in that primary, and there's a couple other folks. But the latest poll has Matt, Caroline in the low mid 20s, Gail in the high teens, and then everyone else is in single digits, I think. So safe to say that those are the three that I think pretty much are going to have a chance. Now, a couple background. Obviously, I mentioned who Gail Huff Brown is. She was a journalist before that in the Boston area. She actually was down here a little bit at the local ABC station when Scott Brown was a senator. But so she's got some decent name ID because she was in that Boston media market. And obviously, Scott Brown has been, very active campaigning with and for her. Caroline Levitt, I think she's 25, might be 26, something like that. She worked in the press office at the end of the Trump administration. She was one of the assistant press secretaries, I think. And so she worked for Haley. So that's her background. Matt Mowers worked in the Trump administration in the State Department. He ran last time, and I think came up about 5 points short of beating Pappas. So he's run before, but the Caroline and Matt have really gone after each other. He has taken to calling her fake MAGA Caroline from the swamp. She calls him a Fauci foot soldier and a pharma bro. Apparently, he had a client at one point that was in the pharma world. Look, all's fair in politics. I'll tell you that. I mean, so they're basically at this point, especially noting what I said, how close this thing is. They're just going to be throwing mud at each other, and so we'll see tonight. We're if you hopefully you watch the show and you know that we don't. This isn't really our style to. So we'll ask them about the attacks, and see what they say. So that's the one to watch. The other thing that's interesting is that Governor Chris Sununu is seeking a fourth term. He only served 2 years up there in New Hampshire. Oh, I couldn't imagine having to run as governor like over and over again. Whatever. But he is in a primary. My guess is that he's fine. I think it's 3 or 4 candidates, but he will win. This shouldn't be any kind of surprise. Anyway, that's New Hampshire for you. Rhode Island is an interesting one as well. There's 2 big races that people are keeping their eye on in Rhode Island. The first is the Democratic primary for governor. The Republican is pretty much set. Her name is Ashley Callis. She's the nominee. But Governor Dan McKee is technically the incumbent. I say technically because he was the lieutenant governor for almost 2 terms when Biden tapped Governor Gina Raimondo to be Commerce Secretary. So she, resigned as governor, moved to Washington, D.C. She's currently the Commerce Secretary. McKee had been the lieutenant governor. Now, I will just say this from the outset. I don't believe they were exactly buddies. I think that's being generous. And so he took over, and, from all estimations, he has done everything to kind of take what would be normal advantages of a year or two, a year and a half or so of being the incumbent governor and kind of squandered it. I mean, I think that's probably being generous too. But anyway, it'll be interesting because he faces a whole host of folks. Nellie Gorbea is the current Secretary of State. And there's a lot of people. I mean, she's apparently giving him a run for money. He's still up, and he's in the high 20s. So I have a feeling he could pull this out with a slim plurality. But some people are making a big deal out of the fact that she would be the first Latina, and she would be heavily favored. Don't get me wrong in the general, but there's a lot of the left that's going nuts that somehow like she would. But and then you've got this Helena Foulkes, who's a former CBS executive. I've talked to some folks in Rhode Island who think that she's very impressive. She's just not polling as high as you need to be at this point. And when you drive around Rhode Island, I was there enough this summer that it's just it's not like I'm in tight with the Democratic voting establishment bloc there or anywhere else. I just didn't get the sense in terms of commercials and visibility that she comes off as somebody that's running 15 points down. Put it that way. The other big race is in the 2nd congressional district. Rhode Island has 2 congressional districts, just like New Hampshire. Pretty much evenly divides the state from Providence west, Providence east. The 1st district is the east side of the state. The 2nd district is the west side of the state. Here's the thing that's so funny. The west side of the state was last represented by a Republican, Claudine Schneider, and I think she left in late 80s. That tells you that's how long it's been, right? 1st district, we actually had a guy named Ron Makeley when I was still there. But that's neither here nor there. If you ask people, they would probably say the 1st district's more likely to go Republican if it ever did. But the Republicans don't have a primary. Alan Fung, who's the former mayor of Cranston, ran for governor 3 times. Anyway, he found his footing in this race, man, because he is up anywhere from 5 to 10 points, depending on the polling. The leader on the Dem side, and that's where the big race is tonight to figure out who will face Alan Fung, is a guy named Seth Magaziner. He's the state treasurer. He is not a strong campaigner. He is not the folks that I've talked to during the summer. Just he does not come across as a good people person, as a strong politician. I think that's being very generous. Anyway, so those are the races I'm keeping an eye on tonight. But I will say this: the thing that's interesting about that 2nd district, and the reason I bring it up, is Fung being up. Who cares? 2 points, 5 points, never mind 10 in one of the latest public polls, is a real testament to how bad things are that they're willing to vote Republican. Now, I will say this: it's an open seat because Kevin Langevin, the guy who's been there for a long time, is not seeking re-election. So Fung actually kind of has had an advantage because he's been out there by himself, being able to solidify his, kind of reach across the aisle, get out there, talk to folks, et cetera, et cetera. So I actually, this is to me a race to keep an eye on heading into these final weeks. And if Fung pulls this out on election night, that's going to tell you that there really is a red wave. Because when the people of Rhode Island in that district particularly are voting against a Democrat that's held that seat for decades, literally decades, that tells you where things are. Good for that. Anyway. All right, the last story is that I mentioned the Emmys, not something you normally would hear me talk about, but it reminded me this morning. So tonight it's going on NBC. Kenan Thompson from Saturday Night Live is the host. And the funny thing is that I don't know. It'll be interesting to see this. These things have really done themselves in because of politics. They can't. The hosts can't help themselves, or the executive producers, I don't know who, but they always have to figure out a way to get the politics in there, and it's always one-sided, and viewership goes down. I'll be interested. I don't know that I'll watch it because I just don't care. But it'll be interesting because Kenan Thompson has really never been the real political person. He's a funny guy. So if he can keep it funny and not political, he actually might find a recipe. But I say all this, and the reason, again, you're probably still like, so what, Sean? Why are you talking about it? Because it dawned on me that 2017, I did this surprise appearance at the Emmys. And I don't know, I thought, it was interesting. I would share the story. So it was funny. I was actually out. I'd agreed to go out to LA. I'd resigned from the White House effective September 1st. So interestingly, I'd submitted my resignation on July 21st. And I told the president, hey, I'll be glad to stick around for a few weeks to help with the transition. I don't need to go into all this for you, but there's, it's in my book, The Briefing. But the bottom line is I thought I was going to help out. And as you know, there was a bunch of up and down in that period. So it kind of worked out. But anyway, I had officially stepped down on September 1st. I had taken a couple days. And there were a lot of interested in shows that had reached out. And I had a couple conversations with some of the hosts, et cetera. And agreed to go on Jimmy Kimmel. So I'm out in LA getting ready to tape Jimmy Kimmel. And he films right off Hollywood Boulevard. Like literally, if you're on Hollywood Boulevard, there's a theater that's right across, right down the street from the Dolby Theater. And it's and that's where Jimmy Kimmel is every night. So anyway, and there's a hotel like right across the street where they put everyone up. So I'm out there taping, getting ready to tape Jimmy Kimmel, and a guy named Chris Litt, who is now the head of CNN, calls me and says, "Hey, I know you're in town for Kimmel. Do you have time to meet quickly for coffee?" So I said, sure. Now, at the time, Chris Litt was Stephen Colbert's executive producer from his show. I had crossed paths with him because he had been in the news business for a long time. He used to be the executive producer of Morning Joe. He went on to produce CBS Early Morning Show. So we had kind of crossed paths a number of times. We weren't exactly best friends, but we knew each other enough, and he obviously knew I was in LA. So I walked down and sit down with him, and he says, "Hey, I have Stephen and I, Stephen's hosting the Emmys. I've got an idea that we wanted to run by you." And I said, "Okay, so what's the idea?" And he says, "What if you agree? Would you be interested in kind of opening the Emmys and surprising everyone and coming out and joking that, that we're hoping that this is going to be the biggest Emmys?" And I was like, "Oh man, I'm interested, but I don't know. Everything was sort of, like I said, I'd been out of the White House for like a week and a half. So I talked it over with this very small group of folks, and I thought, okay, this could be kind of cool. And they were like, okay, but it's a surprise. Like, you cannot tell anybody. So I go back to DC after Kimmel. I mean, that's why this is so funny. I literally am in LA. I think we taped Kimmel on Thursday night, maybe. I think that's what it was. I fly back to LA to DC on Friday. I'm here on the weekend in Alexandria. And then Sunday night, is it Sunday? I forgot what it was. They basically are like, look, put a hat on, kind of whatever. Don't tell me what you're doing, and fly. We're gonna fly you back to LA, and everything is under an assumed name, and the hotel, and they don't want me going out anywhere or whatever. And I get to they have a car pick me up. I forgot what the name is, Jones or something, right? And I get there, and then we sneak into the theater underground, come up, practice this, and it was funny because I don't know if you recall this, but Melissa McCarthy wins an Emmy that year for her portrayal of me. And so at one point, Stephen says, if you guys haven't met, maybe we should kind of do this. And when we did it live, I went out and did my part, and then he looks out, and of course, Melissa McCarthy and all of the folks from Saturday Night Live are in the front row because they are all nominated for Emmys. Her, as I said, for playing me. And at that point, it was going to be Stephen was going to, the way we had rehearsed it, was going to say, "Sean Spicer, come meet Melissa McCarthy. Oh my God, you haven't met." And then we go to commercial break. Well, that's how we had rehearsed it. We go live, and suddenly it doesn't happen. And I, to this day, still have not really gotten a complete answer as to what happened on that. But needless to say, it's funny because everyone always asks me, have you ever met Melissa McCarthy? And apparently there was something years ago that we may have crossed paths at. I don't recall that ever. But since leaving the White House, no. And that's as close as we ever came. But we never actually met because something, I don't know, I've never had a full conversation with Stephen about it afterwards either. But anyway, it is what it is. Just thought I'd share that fun little inside story with you. Anyway, another great conversation coming up for you this Thursday. I appreciate everybody who continues to download, subscribe, share this. Really means a lot. So thank you. And if you know somebody who you think would enjoy the podcast, especially as we head into the final 60 days, please do share it. It's great to see it grow. So thank you for watching it. If you ever have a question or a suggestion, you can always DM on Instagram or go to SeanSpicer.com, and we have a contact button there as well. But always love to hear your feedback, and thank you for all your support. With that, I'll see you Thursday on Beyond the Briefing. Thanks.